Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Nali Ung. 2026 marks 125 years of dedicated service by the Australian Army and its predecessors. Today, we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Arthur Peter Robert Leslie Gay. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Those who are able to do so, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops at Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed at the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record that they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who've given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Corporal Arthur Leslie Peter Robert Gay. Arthur Gay was born in the Melbourne suburb of Fitzroy on the 14th of June 1904, the son of Susan and Richard Gay. He grew up in Fitzroy, probably attended the local school, and went on to work as a motor wrecker. On the 19th of August 1925, he married Emily Love. The couple lived for a time in Fitzroy before moving to the suburb of Preston. Arthur Gay enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 30th of June 1941 at the age of 37. After a period of leave in August, he joined the Australian Army Service Corps. While the Medical Corps, engineers and signals maintained their own supply branches to distribute specialist equipment, the Australian Army Service Corps were the Army's grocers who procured, stored and distributed consumable stores such as food and petrol. They were also the Army's truckies who carried troops, stores and ordnance where required. Initially transferred to the 3rd Motor Transport Company, Gay soon joined a training regiment and on the 1st of September was promoted to temporary corporal. In November, Corporal Gay embarked from Melbourne bound for active overseas service. Arriving in Singapore, he was detached for duty to the 2nd 3rd Ordnance Store. He continued there through December when his rank of corporal was confirmed. As war broke in the Pacific, Japanese seaborne forces and those based in Vichy, French-controlled Indochina overran Thailand and invaded Malaya. The rapid Japanese advance seemed almost unstoppable. Singapore was the keystone of British Empire defence planning in Asia. The Singapore strategy dictated that if a threat developed in Asia, a fleet could be sent from Britain to the new naval base in Singapore within 3 months. British propagandists proclaimed Singapore an impenetrable fortress, but with Britain's arms and equipment committed to Europe for the war against Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, the defenders of Malaya were forced to make do. The Australians had some success, but Japanese forces were mobile, had air support, and aggressively pushed through the ill-prepared defenders, causing panic and confusion. A series of Allied withdrawals resulted. The last British Empire troops were evacuated from Malaya across the causeway to Singapore on the 31st of January 1942. The battle for Singapore began on the night of the 8th of February. Despite fierce fighting, by the 13th of February, the battle for Singapore Island was all but over. Allied forces surrendered 2 days later, and 130,000 British and Commonwealth troops, among them Corporal Gay, became prisoners of war. Thousands of Allied soldiers were initially kept at Changi, but before long the Japanese began moving prisoners to other locations where they would effectively become slave labourers. In early July 1942, Arthur Gay was amongst almost 1,500 prisoners of war in B-Force, which sailed from Singapore in the Ubi Murray. 10 days later, they established a camp at Sandakan on the northeastern coast of Borneo, where prisoners began building an airstrip. At first, conditions and food supplies were reasonable. However, from September 1942, the Japanese control began to tighten. From mid-1943, conditions at Sandakan deteriorated. Treatment of the remaining prisoners worsened in 1944 with brutal beatings, torture, and dwindling food supplies. By early 1945, the Japanese feared an Allied invasion of Borneo. In response, they began moving the prisoners away from the coast, overland to Ranau, a small village some 250 kilometres to the west. The first group left on January 28, 1945. They were already weak from disease, malnutrition, and most lacked boots. Those who fell by the wayside or were unable to continue were executed along the way. Further death marches took place in May and June, again with horrendous losses. All told, some 2,428 British and Australian prisoners died at Sandakan or on the death marches to Ranau. Only 6 Australians survived the marches. Back at Sandakan, those too weak to join the death marches were left behind to die. Corporal Arthur Gay is thought to have died of malaria at Sandakan No. 2 camp on his 41st birthday. He was buried in slit trenches in No. 2 compound But like most, he were never recovered. So today Arthur is commemorated on the Labuan Memorial. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today besides the poor reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Corporal Arthur Leslie Peter Robert Gay, who gave his life for us, for our freedom, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.